we were congruent with that, but also be able to look at criminal justice reform, look at economic reform, and say these are conservative free market principles that make sense across our delineations in America. We don't know our conservatism as well as we think we do. The challenge to the modern conservative in America is you need to get deeper into your conservative thought, and you need to be able to show people why it can work. Not necessarily where you want them to be, but where they are right now. And leaders, inspirational leaders, can go get people where they are and help elevate them to that next level, walk with them arm in arm, and help create better communities. That's what I'm hoping for, whether it's throwing out legislative ideas or trying to be a presence that brings people together. We need more people doing that type of stuff.
And Lenny, I know that you're often testifying and you're able to get a lot of these ideas passed in Pennsylvania. So that's great to see. One thing I wanted to point to specifically that you mentioned is you talk about qualified immunity. You talk about the violation of civil rights and many constitutional rights, specifically in the Black community. What is your take on what's happening right now in Minneapolis with talk of defunding or disbanding or who knows, whatever they're doing with the police department? And it seems as if a lot of this is missing, like the real conversations of how do you address like the specific things that police officers do in our current American life that is against our rights and does disproportionately impact African Americans in specific cities. What is your kind of take on that?
Well, it goes back to what we were just talking about. Both sides have lost their way. So rather than talking about, is there an opportunity to address qualified immunity, something that was basically created in the 1960s. It's not something that's constitutionally found. When you start talking about a specific police item or something that impacts policing, something such as stop and frisk, which is a police tactic that's disproportionately used against African Americans with less than a 1% arrest rate with a conviction, and even less than that where stop and frisk turns up a weapon. Talking about that is not the same as saying defund the police, send all the money to the schools, and we're going to basically send police out there with 70% of the protection that they had maybe 2-3 years ago. Plus, it's also talking in a vacuum, guys. And this is one of the things that people forget. It's not that long ago where we had ISIS cells creating chaos on the American homeland. 9/11 was only 20 years ago. If you have another cell that tries to take out tries to enact, if you will, a terrorist threat, a terrorist plan, New York City subway, remember we almost had the bombing in Times Square in 2010. We had near chance incidences in Dallas and Pittsburgh and Chicago. We had, unfortunately, incidences in California. If you have an uprising of that again, taking advantage of the unrest domestically in America, who's going to respond to that first? It's going to be the local police departments. It's going to be the local agencies before the feds can get there, before the National Guard can get there, or dare I say, heaven forbid, the active military gets there. And do you want them keeping you safe with, enhanced water guns and water pistols? Or do you want them to be able to confront that type of threat? You can appropriately fund the police, but make sure they have the resources that take on that type of threat in the 21st century and not use those type of weapons against Americans purporting their First Amendment rights. You can do both. And again, that goes back to both sides have lost their way. We're retreating to our corners, which means it's the extreme of the philosophies from the right and from the left. And you don't find any type of common ground. It doesn't make sense from one side to the other and back and forth. There's a way to do this. And I think Minneapolis has some good conversations going on. You see conservatives talking about getting rid of qualified immunity. You're starting to see conservatives such as in the National Review just a little while ago saying we were wrong on stop and frisk. It has not reduced crime. It's only violated civil rights, and we can bring the crime rate down through other ways. So people are having the right conversations, but unfortunately, you're starting to also see that retreating back into the separate camps where one are saying the police have to have every tactic possible, which is not necessarily the case because we still have a constitution. And there's the other side saying defund the police because they're all racist and they're all bad. And we know that's not true either. There's a way to come common ground, have common sense, and still take substantive steps towards a better future.